All right, welcome. Today, we're jumping into some of the most famous and, let's be honest, probably most misunderstood verses in the whole Bible. We're talking about Matthew 24, specifically verses 36 through 41. Our goal here? We're going to try to peel back all the layers of interpretation and get right down to what these words would have meant to the people who first heard them. It's pretty dramatic.
So let's get right into it. One is taken, one is left. I mean, you've heard that phrase, right? It immediately makes you think of certain things, probably pretty modern ideas. But what if that's not what it meant at all? The source material we're digging into today shows us a completely different and, frankly, much grittier picture. It's all rooted in the historical, real-world events of the Roman siege of Jerusalem back in 70 AD.
So where do we start? Well, it all kicks off with verse 36. And this verse is all about timing. It sets this tone of mystery and, honestly, urgency that's just going to hang over everything else we're about to look at. And here it is. The verse just lays it out there, plain and simple. No one knows the day or the hour, not even the angels, only the Father. And you have to understand, this isn't just some throwaway line, it's the whole point. It's meant to hammer home this idea that you have to be ready all the time, precisely because you'll never get a specific date on your calendar. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. According to the sources, this verse is kind of doing two things at once. On one hand, it had a very real, very immediate meaning for the people living in the first century, specifically about the coming destruction of Jerusalem. But on the other hand, it also serves as a kind of pattern, a type, that gives us a blueprint for the final second coming. Okay, so moving on to verses 37 through 39. To really drive home just how sudden and unexpected this whole thing is going to be, the text uses an analogy, and it's a big one. It's a story that every single person that original audience would have known inside and out. The days of Noah. And what's the key takeaway from the story of Noah here? It's how unbelievably normal everything was. I mean, people were just living their lives, eating, drinking, getting married, with absolutely no idea that a catastrophe was literally right around the corner. The point is, disaster didn't creep in with a bunch of warnings. It hit a world that was just going about its business, completely unprepared.
So, the source is drawing this straight line, this direct comparison between the people in Noah's time and the people being warned in the first century. And what do they have in common? A total lack of awareness. Life felt completely normal, totally predictable, right up until the second it all fell apart. The warning is all about that sudden, complete disruption to everyday life.
And this is the core of the analogy, right here. The flood that people were being warned about? Well, it wasn't a flood of water. According to this historical take, the flood was the Roman army, a massive, overwhelming wave of soldiers led by General Vespasian that was about to pour over the land and completely demolish Jerusalem.
Okay, let's get to the big ones, verses 40 and 41. These might be the most debated, most misunderstood verses in the whole chapter. But when you look at them through the lens of a military invasion, wow, their meaning changes completely.
Yeah, these are the lines everyone knows. The picture it paints is so vivid, isn't it? Two people, side by side, doing the most normal things you can imagine. A guy out in the field, a woman grinding grain at the mill. And then, in a flash, their lives go in two totally different directions.
So this really is the million-dollar question. What does it actually mean to be taken versus left? We all know the common interpretation today, but if we stick with the source material's perspective, what we find is a very different and honestly a much darker reality for someone living in the first century.
For a lot of people today, these verses immediately scream rapture, right? The idea that believers get taken up to heaven and non-believers are left behind. But it's important to note, as the sources point out, that this particular interpretation is actually much, much more recent. It wasn't the way people originally thought about it. Okay, get ready for this because this is the crucial twist. According to this historical reading, being taken was not the good outcome. No way. In the context of a brutal war with Rome, being taken meant you were killed by a Roman sword, and being left? That meant you were left alive, to be captured and sold into the nightmare of Roman slavery. I mean, think about that. Both options were absolutely terrifying. So you see, when we put these verses back where they belong, in the context of Jerusalem facing imminent destruction, the whole thing changes. It stops being about some distant cosmic event and becomes a very real, very immediate, and frankly, a very scary warning for the actual people who heard these words spoken.
And this view really anchors the whole prophecy in history. It suggests that the warning about a coming wasn't for thousands of years later.
It was fulfilled in judgment right then, within that generation, exactly as they were told it would be. This was a message about the end of their world as they knew it, the collapse of their nation, and a day of reckoning that was right on their doorstep.
So does looking at it this way make the passage less powerful? I don't think so. If anything, it sharpens the point. It leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? What does it mean for us to be watchful today? Because that core message, that call to live with your eyes open, knowing that we also don't know the day or the hour, that message travels right from the first century and lands squarely in our laps today.